All right, I'm gonna make this quick, brief, get it over with, but everything will be factual, all right? Just the facts. Here we go. 10 o'clock, I clock in, usual time, Tuesday nights. At 10:30, Matthew Shepard walks in, sits down and orders a Heineken.
Phil Labrie, friend of Matthew Shepard. Matt liked to drink Heineken and nothing else. Heineken even though it was $9.50 for a six-pack. He'd always buy the same beer.
So what can I tell you about Matt? Well, if you had 100 customers like him, it'd be the most perfect bar I'd ever been in, okay? And nothing to do with sexual orientation. Absolute mannerisms. Manners, politeness, intelligence, you know, taking care of me, as in tips. Everything. Conversation, dress nice, clean cut. Some people you just know. They sit down, please, thank you, and offer intellect within their vocabulary. So we kicked it there, and he didn't seem to have any worries or like he was looking for anyone, you know, just enjoying his beer and the company around. Then around 11:30 or like 11:45, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson walk in. I didn't know their names then either, but they're the accused. They're the perps. They're the accused. So they walk in all dirty, stone-faced, grungy, gimme, that type of thing, you know? So they come up to the bar, and then as you know, they paid for a pitcher of beer with dimes and quarters. A pitcher of beer with dimes, I mean, you don't forget that. At $5.50 and dimes and quarters, that's a friggin' nightmare. Now, they didn't seem intoxicated at all, but they just took their beer back there into the pool room with them and kept it themselves. Next thing I knew, probably like half an hour later, I saw them walking around, no beer. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to ask them if they want another one. I mean, they just paid for a whole pitcher with dimes and quarters. I have a real good feeling they don't have any more money left.
Romaine Patterson. Money meant nothing to Matthew, because he came from a lot of it. I mean, he'd hand over his wallet in like 2 seconds, because money meant nothing to him. His shoes might have meant something. They can say it was robbery. I don't buy it. Not even for an Ida in a second.
Next thing I know, I'm looking over and Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson had been talking to Matthew Shepard.
Kristen Price, girlfriend of Aaron McKinney. So, Aaron told me that this guy walked up to him and said that he was gay and wanted to get with Aaron and Russ. And Aaron got aggravated with it and told him that he was straight and wanted nothing to do with him and walked off. Aaron said that's when he and Russ went to the bathroom and decided to pretend to be gay so that they could get him into his truck and rob him. They wanted to teach him a lesson not to come onto straight people.
Okay, no. They're saying that Matt approached them, that he came onto them. No, I absolutely, positively disbelieve and refute the statement 100%. 100%. And I'm going to give you 2 reasons why. 1, character reference. Why would he come onto them? Why would he come on to them? He wasn't coming on to anybody else in the bar. Like, they say he's gay, right? He's a flaming gay. He's gonna come on to people like that. Bull, he never come on to me. Hello. 2, territorialism is the word that I would use, and that's the fact that Matt was sitting there. Aaron and Russell were in the pool room. Upon their first interaction, they were in Matt's area, where Matt had been seen all night long. So, who approached who by that?
But Matthew was that kind of person. I mean, like, he'd never not talk to someone for any kind of reason. Someone come up to him, start talking to him, he'd just be like, oh, okay, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he never had a problem with just striking up a conversation with anybody.
Matt did feel lonely a lot of times. Me knowing that, knowing how gullible Matt could be, he would have walked right into it. The fact that he was alone at the bar that night without any friends made him that much more vulnerable.
So here's the thing. And this is what I'm testifying to, because I'm also basically the key eyewitness in this case. So what I'm testifying to is that I saw Matthew leave. I saw 2 individuals leave with him, and I didn't see their faces, but I saw the backs of their heads. And at the same time, Aaron and Russell were no longer around. You do the math.
Actually, I think the DJ was the one to see him go out that night. He gave him a cigarette or something. His name's Shadow.
I was the last person that Matt talked to before he left the place tonight. I was just doing my thing and he stopped me up. I stopped him actually. And he's like, hey Shadow, da da da. And I was like, what man, you getting ready to leave? And he's like, yeah man, and this and that. But then I noticed them 2 guys. And they
Sherry Ennison. Russell was just so sweet. He was the one who was the Eagle Scout. His whole presence was just quiet and sweet. So of course it doesn't make sense to me. And I know people snap and whatever, and it's not like it was a real intimate relationship. I was just his landlord. I did work with him at the Chuck Wagon too. And I remember, like, at the Christmas party, he was just totally drunk out of his mind. You know, like, we all were pretty much just party time, but he wasn't belligerent. He didn't change. His personality didn't change. He was still the same little meek Russell. I remember him coming up to me and saying, "When you get a chance, Sherry, can I have a dance?" Which we never did get around to doing that, but now I just want to shake him. You know, what were you thinking? What in the hell were you thinking?
Stephen E. Johnson, the fence. Been out here 4 times. I've taken visitors. This place has become a pilgrimage site. Clearly, it's a very powerful, personal experience. You know, you can't, so stark and so quiet. You can't help but think of Matthew out here for 18 hours and nearly freezing temperatures with that view. They're all isolated, and the God, oh God, why have you forsaken me, comes to mind.
Company member Greg Perotti. Phil Labrie, a friend of Matthew's, took us to the fence this morning. Broke down the minute I touched it. I feel such a strong kingship with this young man. On the way back, I made sure no one saw me crying.
Lee Fondakowski. Greg was crying on the way back. I couldn't bring myself to tears, but I felt the same way. I have an interview this afternoon with Aaron Kreifels. He's the boy who found Matthew out there at the fence. I'm not sure I'm up for it. I'll see if someone else can do it.
Took off on my bike around 5 p.m. on Wednesday from my dorm. I just kind of felt like going for a ride, you know. And I was going down Cactus Canyon, and I'm not super familiar with that area, so I was sort of just picking the way to go, which now kind of makes me feel like God wanted me to find him, because there was no other way. I was going to go that way, and I was in some deep sand, and I wanted to turn back, but for some reason I didn't. So I was riding along, and there was this rock on the ground, and I just drilled it, went over the handlebars, and ended up on the ground. And so I got up, and I was sort of just dusting myself off, and then I saw something, which ended up to be Matt. He was just lying there, you know, by the fence, and just thought it was a scarecrow. You know, like, Halloween's coming up, it's probably just a Halloween gag, so I didn't think anything of it. So I grabbed my bike, and I walked it around the fence. That was there was a buck-type fence, and then I saw his hair. And that was a major key to me noticing it was a human being, was his hair. I had just thought it was a dummy. You know, I noticed, I even noticed his chest was going up and down, but I still thought it was a dummy. I thought it was some sort of mechanism. But when I saw his hair, well, I knew it was a human being, so I ran as fast as I could, and I called the police.
Officer Reggie Flutie. I responded to the call. When I got to the fence, at first the only thing I could see was partially somebody's feet. So I got out of my truck and raced over. I'd seen what appeared to be a young man, 13, 14 years old, because he was just so tiny laying on his back. he was tied to the bottom of a pole. I did the best I could. The gentleman was laying on the ground, Matthew Shepard. He was covered in dry blood. There was dry blood underneath him, there was dry blood all over his head, and he was barely breathing, and he was doing the best he could. I was going to breathe for him, but I couldn't get his mouth open. His mouth wouldn't open for me. He was covered in, like I said, partially dry blood all over his head. The only place he didn't have any blood on his face was where he appeared to have been crying. His head looked distorted, like it didn't look normal. He looked as if he had a real harsh head wound.
Dr. Cantway, I was working in the emergency room the night that Matthew Shepard was brought in. I don't think that any of us can remember seeing a patient in this kind of condition for a long time. Those of us who've worked in big city hospitals have seen this, but we have some people here who've not worked in a big city hospital. And it's not something you expect here. You expect it. You expect to see these kind of injuries to come from a car going down a hill at 80 miles an hour. You expect to see gross injuries from something like that. This horrendous, terrible thing. But you don't expect to see this from someone doing this to another person. The ambulance report said it was a beating, so we knew.
There's nothing I could have done. I mean, if there was anything I could have done, I would have done it. But there was nothing. And I was screaming my head off, trying to get something, anything out of him. Like, hey, wake up, hello? But he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't anything.
He was tied to the pole with his thumbs out in what we call the cuffing position. It's the way we handcuff people. He was bound with a real thin white rope, and it went around the base of the pole and went up about 4 inches up off the ground. His shoes were missing. He was tied extremely tight. So when I tried to slip my knife in there between the pole and his wrists, I had to be extremely careful not to harm Matthew any further.
Your first thought is, well, certainly you'd like to think that it's somebody from out of town who comes through and beats somebody. I mean, things like this happen, Stuff happens, and it happens in Laramie. But if there's been somebody who's been beaten repeatedly, certainly this is something that offends us. I think that's a good word. It offends us.
So when I got my knife through there and we rolled him over to his left side. And when we did that, he quit breathing. Immediately, I put him back on his back. And there was just enough of an adjustment. It allowed me to cut him free there. I'd seen the EMS unit trying to get the location, so when the ambulance arrived, we put a neck collar on him, put him on a backboard, and scooted him out from underneath the fence, which was about 5 minutes later. Rob drove the ambulance to Ivinson's hospital emergency room.
Now the strange thing is, 20 minutes before Matthew came in, Aaron McKinney was brought in by his girlfriend. Now I guess he'd got into a fight later on that night back in town. So there I am, working on Aaron, and the ambulance comes in with Matthew. Now at this point, I don't know that there's a connection at all. So I tell Aaron to wait, and I go and treat Matthew. So there's Aaron in one room of the ER, and Matthew in another room 2 doors down. Now as soon as we saw Matthew, it was very obvious that his care was beyond our capabilities. We called the neurosurgeon at Poudre Valley, and he was on the road in an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
They showed me a picture of him. Days later, I saw a picture of Matthew. I would have never recognized him.
Then 2 days later, I found out the connection, and I was very struck. They were two kids. They were both my patients, and they were two kids. I took care of both of them, of both their bodies. And for a brief moment, I wondered if this is how God feels when he looks down at us. How we are all his kids. Our bodies, our souls, and I felt a great deal of compassion for both of them.